On September 15th, 2023, a 30-year-old mother from Macomb, Oklahoma, walked out of her home and never came back. When her husband reported her missing the following day, he had a story ready. She had gone on a date, he said. She left on her own. He did not know where she was. Investigators listened, they took notes, and then they started pulling the threads of that story apart, one by one. What they found on the other end of those threads was not a woman who had walked away from her life. It was a woman who had been taken from it, and the man responsible had been standing in front of television cameras the entire time, grieving publicly, speaking to reporters, performing the role of a worried husband so convincingly that some people believed him. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and in this case, it surfaced less than 500 yards from Michaela's own front door. This is her story, and she deserves to have it told. Michaela Faye Byers was 30 years old and a mother living in Macomb, Oklahoma, a small, tight-knit rural community in Pottawatomie County, roughly an hour east of Oklahoma City. Macomb is the kind of place where people know their neighbors, where news travels fast, where a missing woman is not just a statistic, she is someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone's mother. And Michaela was all of those things. She was known to the people around her. She had a life, she had children, and she had a future that was supposed to stretch out ahead of her in the way that futures are supposed to do at 30 years old. Her husband was Frank Byers. On the surface, they were a family. Behind closed doors, the picture was far more complicated, as investigators would soon discover. When Michaela did not come home on the night of September 15th, 2023, the clock began ticking. And in missing persons cases involving intimate partners, those first hours matter enormously. But Frank did not report her missing until the following day. And when he did, he came with a story that was already fully formed. She had gone on a date, he told authorities. She left willingly. He had no idea where she had gone. It was a story designed to point the investigation away from him. It would not work. September 15th, 2023 began like any other day in Macomb, but by the end of it, Michaela Faye Byers was gone. The exact details of what happened inside that home on the night of her disappearance would eventually emerge through the investigation, but in the immediate aftermath, all that existed publicly was Frank's version of events, and Frank's version had Michaela leaving voluntarily, alive, and on her own terms. When investigators began looking into the case, they found that version increasingly difficult to believe. The evidence around them told a different story. The timeline Frank provided had inconsistencies. His behavior in the hours following Michaela's disappearance raised questions. And when investigators began examining the area around the family home, what they found would bring the case to a devastating turning point. 4 days after Michaela was reported missing, on September 19th, 2023, her body was discovered. She had not gone on a date. She had not left on her own. She had not walked away from her life or her children or the community that knew her name. Her body was found wrapped in carpet, discarded in a drainage ditch. The location was not far away. It was not hidden in some distant, unreachable place. It was less than 500 yards from her own home. The woman Frank Byers had told the world was out there somewhere. She had been right there the entire time. The discovery of Michaela's body transformed the investigation immediately. This was no longer a missing persons case. This was a homicide. And the focus of that investigation sharpened onto the man who had been giving television interviews, speaking to reporters with a composed and practiced grief, and positioning himself as a husband desperately searching for answers. Investigators determined that Michaela had been shot, that after her death, her body had been wrapped in carpet that had been deliberately sourced, deliberately used, and deliberately disposed of along with her remains. The level of premeditation involved in concealing her body spoke to planning, to calculation, to someone who believed they could construct a believable enough story to walk away clean. The carpet became a critical piece of the investigation. Tracing it, understanding where it came from and how it ended up wrapped around Michaela's body, helped investigators build the case that would eventually put Frank Byers in front of a judge with no credible defense left to offer. Meanwhile, Frank continued to maintain his innocence publicly. He gave interviews. He spoke about Michaela. He presented himself to the world as a man in pain. But investigators were no longer listening to his performance. They were building their case. And piece by piece, the evidence was doing what evidence does when it is gathered carefully and methodically. It was telling the truth. In October 2023, Frank Byers was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Michaela Faye Byers. Arrests and trial outcome. Frank Byers was taken into custody in October 2023, approximately 1 month after Michaela's body was found. The charge was first-degree murder. In the months that followed, the legal process moved forward. The evidence assembled by investigators in Pottawatomie County was substantial. The physical evidence, the timeline, the circumstances surrounding Michaela's disappearance, and the recovery of her body, all of it pointed in one direction. On January 31st, 2025, Frank Byers entered a guilty plea. There would be no trial, no opportunity to sit before a jury and once again attempt to rewrite what had happened. No more performances for any audience. Just a courtroom, a judge, and the full weight of what he had done pressing down on the record permanently. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will not be released. He will not return to the community where Michaela lived and died. He will not have the opportunity to construct another story for another audience. For Michaela's family, for her children, and for the people of Macomb who had watched this case unfold with grief and disbelief, January 31st, 2025 was not a day of celebration. Justice never feels like celebration when the person at the center of it is already gone. But it was a day of finality. A day when the system worked the way it was supposed to work. A day when Michaela Faye Byers was not forgotten. Cases like this one leave marks that do not fade quickly. In a small community like Macomb, Oklahoma, the loss of Michaela Byers was not abstract. It was personal. People knew her. People saw her. People watched her children grow and watched her husband stand in front of cameras and listen to him speak and felt the particular horror of realizing in hindsight exactly what they had been watching. But beyond Macomb, Michaela's story is part of a much larger and deeply troubling pattern. Statistics tell us consistently that when a woman is killed, the perpetrator is most often someone she knew intimately. A partner, a husband, someone who had access to her trust as well as her home. Michaela was not taken by a stranger. She was taken by someone who was supposed to love her. And that is the conversation her story demands we have. Not just about this case, but about the warning signs that exist in relationships before violence escalates to this point. About the resources available to women who feel unsafe. About the importance of listening when someone expresses fear about the person they are living with. Michaela Faye Byers was 30 years old. She was a mother. She had a name and a community and a life that belonged entirely to her. She deserved to grow old. She deserved to watch her children become who they were going to become. She deserved every ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday that was stolen from her. Frank Byers will spend the rest of his life in prison, and Michaela Faye Byers will be remembered, not as a victim, not as a statistic, but as a woman whose story mattered enough to tell, and whose name deserves to be spoken with the respect and dignity that was taken from her on September 15th, 2023. Rest in peace, Michaela. If this story moved you, if you believe that Michaela's name deserves to be heard by as many people as possible, please take 1 second right now and hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss another story. Because every case we cover represents a real person who deserves to be more than a forgotten headline. Drop Michaela's name in the comments below. Let her family know, if they ever find this video, that the world has not moved on, that she is remembered, that she mattered.